Welcome to Uncopyable Women in Business. I'm your host, Kay Miller, also known as Muffler Mama. Stay tuned as I, along with my guests, give you marketing, sales, and personal branding strategies that will give you an uncopyable advantage. I'm here with Kamaria Scott, and Kamaria is on a mission to redefine what it means to be a great people leader. As the founder and CEO of Enetic, she helps organizations build leadership cultures where managers don't just oversee work, they inspire, develop, and drive real impact. With over 20 years of experience in leadership development and organizational change, she's worked with Fortune 500 companies like Accenture, FIS, and BNY Mellon to transform teams and elevate performance. Combining psychology, adult learning principles, and real-world leadership insights, Kamaria equips managers with the tools they need to lead with confidence, clarity, and purpose. Kamaria, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
I almost got through your intro without stumbling. It's quite impressive, and I'm really excited to hear about what you're going to share because it's something different that I haven't had on the podcast before. You have an interesting background with some degrees I've never heard of, and you have your journey to entrepreneurship. So let's start there, and then we can move into the helpful points about what leaders can do and what people who are being led can do to be more effective. So, Kamaria, take it away.
Interesting degrees are in industrial and organizational psychology and adult education, human resource development. And I always tell people, one of them tells me what to think, the other tells me how to build it. And so what that basically means is industrial and organizational psychology is the study of people at work. I've always been fascinated with the work experience. Way back in the day, I used to work for AOL. So some of us who are a certain age will remember that. And I worked for them during the summer when they went from the hourly plan to the unlimited plan. And so we were just inundated with the growth that we were going through. And at the time, I was a college student. So I was a college student working in a call center, and I was figuring out what I wanted to do, what I wanted to be. And so as it just so happened, I'm in this environment where we're experiencing this rapid growth and failing principles of macroeconomics. So I decided I'm not going to be a math business girly. And then one of my professors gave me a VHS tape, so I'm not old, that had this video about ion psychology, and I was fascinated. And so it's really just understanding the psychological principles that underpin how we interact with each other at work. So we talk about motivation, we talk about selection, all of those things. And then I went on to later get a degree in adult education, human resource development. And that just helps me to think through if there's a theory on motivation or development, that's almost like an intangible thing. And so you have to operationalize it in a way for people to digest it and apply it at work. And so those two things have been honestly the sort of foundation of my career and business, of taking what I know about the psychology of work and people and building really impactful learning and change initiatives based on that. That's been what I've been doing my entire career. And so those two degrees have served me well. I will say that.
It's interesting that you bring up AOL and VHS tapes. Like you said, you are of a certain age, and your certain age is probably 20 years younger than my certain age. I remember MySpace, but yeah, AOL was the first email platform. You've Got Mail. I love that movie. And that was AOL messages back and forth. So anyway, that's a fun piece of trivia. Yes. You have this passion for helping people work together, leadership and employees, and do it in a way that really works for both sides. So when you work with a company, do you go in and develop a program for that company to, anyway, how does that work? I'll just ask you, how does that work when you work with the client?
Yes. So when I work with a client, I wouldn't say I build a program, because I think when people think program, they think of this thing that they go through at one time and then they're done. And so what I do is I actually help them think about how they take a change approach to developing your people leaders. So my particular methodology is perspective, practice, community. And what that essentially means is for whatever change you need to have happen in your organization that probably goes through your people leaders, first you need a vision of what does good look like and what is it that you're trying to accomplish. And so I help them with a bit of visioning to figure out what's their current state and what's their future state. Then practice becomes, how do I help them identify the key behaviors that need to take place for them to successfully navigate that change journey? And so there is some training in that, but there might be performance support tools. There may be other things that help with the behavior change that needs to happen. And then community is building an opportunity for them to think about how are they leveraging one another to ensure that the change sticks. So how are they wrapping around what they need to have happen? So I wouldn't necessarily call it a program. I would call it more of a targeted, purposeful intervention to take them from one location to another.
I like your point about things that you learn in a program. And I guess that was not the right word, but yeah, 3 days after you hear a speech or this podcast, maybe you might not remember all the facts, but you will probably remember the stories. And so I might challenge you to come up with a story. In one of the podcasts, your podcast that is Manager to Manager, I was interested in you talking about allowing employees to be authentic, to be genuine and diverse, because leadership means your employees have to be happy. Yes, you've got to be effective and healthy, the things that you talked about. But if your employees aren't happy, if they feel like they're fitting into a mold, they're not going to be good employees and they're probably not going to stay. So can you talk to that point? Just throw in one more thing. The woman that you were talking to said, hey, I've got piercings. I've got tattoos. My look is different than everyone else. And a lot of times people make judgments based on that.
Yes.
Interesting. And how do you promote leadership, encouraging people to be authentic and genuine?
Yeah. So I think it's interesting. A lot of my work is based in employee engagement, right? And employee engagement, we talk about being able to be highly engaged in the work and finding this balance of what the organization needs and what the employee needs. And one of the things that employees need really is to be able to bring their authentic selves to work or be able who they are, because if not, they are engaged in a lot of what we call masking. And that is when I have to show up and pretend to be someone that I'm not in order to fit in. And the reality is that takes energy. It takes effort. It takes mental sort of gymnastics to fit yourself into a mold. But I think the important part about that conversation, and I appreciate Danny DeLorme for being a guest on that show and an episode and having a little vulnerability, is that most importantly, when we think about employee engagement, we want people to be engaged with the work. We want them to love what they're doing. We want them to be so excited about the product they're creating, the environment they're creating it in, that when we start to almost force them to have to shape shift, we diminish that for them. We diminish the joy that they have. And instead of working on what really matters, that project, that patient, that thing, they're spending all the time and effort trying to just figure out how to fit in. So I always tell people, think of engagement like energy, right? It's this ball of energy. And we talk about, and this is going back to why my business is named Enetic. Energy in its kinetic form is potential energy, right? You have this certain amount of it. And when an employee is working, they're going to figure out where they're going to spend that energy, right? So think of it as a ball. Do you want them spending that ball of energy on just figuring out what you need them to look like, sound, and do to be a part of your company? Or do you want them spending that energy on what your company actually does? And so when I talk to people about letting people bring their authentic selves to work, it's really a conversation around where do you want them to spend their energy, trying to fit in or doing what's going to help you be successful.
I'm sure that means a lot to leadership because yes, it's productivity, it's teamwork, all of those things that are, if you're genuine and authentic, your employees will do that. And of course, we've all heard that money isn't always the biggest motivator for employees. It's being acknowledged and feeling like they're doing a good job and being successful. So if you can wrap that all in, and I guess, change the mindset of leaders, that sounds like a big win.
It absolutely is. And I will say that I have found various industries to be more relaxed in nature than others. And most of my time is really spent helping people leaders realize that for people to bring their authentic selves to work, that means you will want to know who they are, that you are curious, that you're asking questions, that you are celebrating differences. I absolutely love when my teams are diverse. I love when they have a different lens. And it's an interesting time when we're talking about diversity and things like that nature,
Yes.
and creating welcoming environments. But I stand very firm on the fact that diversity matters and appreciation of differences matters. As a people leader, I have led global teams, and thinking about, again, the work, have developed programs that have been launched globally in various regions of the world. And I remember someone on my team, I had said something about, and when I say have designed myself rating these words, right? Brick and mortar buildings, blah, 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 things of that nature. And I remember one of my direct reports who was in India said, Kamaria, we don't know what that term means. We don't use brick and mortar. That's an American term. And I appreciated her telling me that, because here I would have launched something to a very large population using words that meant nothing to them, and it likely would have messed them up, right? And so had I been the type of leader who was like, I lead from an American-centric lens, and so everyone has to adapt to me, my culture, my everything, I would have missed that moment instead of being like, oh, I love that my team is so different and diverse. They can give me different examples and ways to make sure that what we're doing matches our full intended audience.
Interesting that you bring that up, because I had a podcast guest a couple times, actually 2 or 3 times. I think her name is Jasmine Bonkowski, and she lives in Berlin. And so we've done some peer coaching. I think you mentioned that about coaching and mentoring. I was talking to her about how you can go into LinkedIn and find someone's education a lot of times. And that can be something that you can bring up and talk about. And I said, to find out someone's alma mater is pretty powerful. And she said, we don't use that term, alma mater. It's funny that you bring that up, because, right, if you want to have a global audience, or if your company has connections globally, it's very important to tune in and talk to them in their language. So that's an excellent point. Something else I wanted to ask you, and there's no such thing I've heard as a dumb question.
Right.
Is people leader your term, or is that just a term I haven't heard? Because I love it. It's not just leadership. It's leading people.
Yes. You know what? There is no such thing as a dumb question. And I am delighted you asked me that. As you can see, I lit up about that because it's very important to me. So I use the term people leader for a couple of reasons. One, I can't pretend like I made it up, and I'll say I didn't make it up, but I made it popular. I was sitting at lunch one day talking to someone, and my podcast is called Manager to Manager. A large part of my brand is Manager to Manager, and I focus on managers. But in this space that I work in, the word leader and manager sometimes are used interchangeably. And I specifically focus on people who lead teams, meaning your job, your box is above somebody else's box. Within the space of leadership, you'll hear everybody's a leader. Everybody, their mother is a leader, right? The up and coming new startup is a leader. The person in the corner office is a leader. You just being you can be a leader. And that's wonderful from a leadership perspective. So when we talk about leadership in general, it's very broad and vague who we're talking to. I am specifically talking to people who have a personal mandate and have been given the duty of care over a team of people. Now, the word manager sometimes makes people feel itchy. And so I even did a podcast where I said, it gives people the ick. I was having lunch with somebody and I said manager, and she's, I don't like that word. I don't like the word manager. And it does sometimes have a negative connotation for people. So I always say, I first say manager, and then I say people leader for those of you that have an aversion to the word. But I want to be super clear. And I think in your language, you say like finding your moose. I do it for clarity purposes so that people know that I am not talking about generic leadership and anybody and their mom who might leader. I am talking about a specific person in an organization.
I want to take a quick break to ask you a question. Does your personal brand set you apart and make you unforgettable? If you're not 100% sure, you need my free email series, 5 Steps to a Profitable Personal Brand. Sign up and get a daily email for 5 days plus a bonus, a list of personal branding shortcuts that will give you an uncopyable advantage. Go to beuncopyable.com/5-emails. And one term that comes to mind when you say manager is micromanager. None of us want to be micromanaged. And I think since you bring that up, would I rather be led or managed? And one thing I hear about leaders all the time is that leaders create leaders. Like you said, in a workplace environment, you don't want your people asking every little question and not making decisions on their own, because I think I talked about sales and no one likes to be sold. And I have a story about my niece when she was just 3 years old. My mom was taking care of her and said, "Shauna, we need to go to the store. Please pick up your toys." And Shauna said, "I don't like to be told." And so in her 3-year-old vocabulary, she really made a very wise statement. So I think that your philosophy of leadership, authenticity, helping your employees feel empowered to make their own decisions and with reason, of course, create a better relationship with employees. So those are all really good.
Yeah. I think that people leaders, so there's a couple of things there, right? One of them is, I always say that people leaders have to balance the relationships and results needed to get work done. So it's not just about the tasks of what needs to happen. So it's a balance between the relationships and the results that need to happen in order to get work done. So you're always balancing relationships, and no one wants to be sold or told, is what I would say, what to do. And so being about the role of a people leader, I always say you have to be an artist, a scientist, and a coach.
Okay, that was quick. So will you say those 3 things again?
And so in being an effective people leader, you want to be an artist, a scientist, and a coach. So an artist, meaning that, going back to that theme of authenticity, the artist in you is have a firm understanding of who you are, what your strengths are, and how that contributes to how you lead. So continuing to going back to our conversation about authenticity, there's a very authentic way that Kamaria leads. I am a very hugs, crying with you, hair braiding kind of a people leader. Somebody else may not be that kind of people leader, and that's okay for them. So continuing to know that you're an artist and you tap into yourself, but also knowing that people leading is a skill. It's just like being a musician. You start off terrible, you practice. So you have to practice to get better at that. The scientist part is you have to be willing to think about how do you test things that work with your team. So if I tell you one way to do something, you don't like it, it doesn't work, that's okay. That's information for me to figure out how do I approach a situation differently in a way that's effective. So that part. And then the coach part is, how do you really work side by side with people on your team to help them be successful? So I love the word coach in this context because it indicates that we're not necessarily talking about a hierarchical relationship. I don't encourage any people leader to think about it with hierarchy. But a coach is somebody who wants you to be successful and is going to be on the sidelines cheering you on and giving you feedback to help you do that. So I think being able to embrace those 3 roles is how you get to being a people leader and redefining what people think of when they think of managers, so that when the word manager pops up, they don't automatically think micromanager.
When I think of coaching, there is a lot of cheerleading involved, and not telling them what to do, but getting them, just like in sales, getting them to make the decision that you want them to make, but they need to feel like it's their decision. So there's some finesse there. So I like your point of artistry, which you don't normally think of, to explain this. And then testing, of course, just like marketing, you test, and if it works, great. If it doesn't work, you know that you need to change something. And again, coaching is really feeling like you have someone on your team versus someone telling you what to do. So the coaching part just can really revolutionize who someone is and what they contribute.
Absolutely. I'm a huge fan of coaching, and it's one of the things that I think that people leaders can do that makes all the difference, because even the approach of it, right, when you are giving feedback from a coaching perspective, you might say, okay, let's look at the data. What do you think of how you just performed? Where do you think there could have been opportunities? What do you think we should celebrate? And all of that is drawing out what's inside of someone and encouraging them to be self-reflective. It's also helping them think about how they move forward successfully in the future. So given what we just talked about, what might be another step you could take? What's one thing? And so if we can help managers and people leaders use that approach, it does shift the dynamic and it shifts the perspective of how people think of them and their role in helping them be successful.
And still be their genuine selves. So I think it's great that you are leading companies through that process of doing that, because they are going to come out so much better for that experience. And I'm sure measurably better, not just, oh, everyone's happier, but they're accomplishing more.
One of the things I love about, even when we think about coaching and my philosophy and why, we talk through my motto being engaged, healthy, and high-performing teams, because we do want people to be engaged. We want them to do the work that needs to be done. And there used to be a model of engagement by a company called Blessing Light, and they had this model of engagement. And they would talk about how true engagement is basically when you're creating that win situation, when the employee is getting what they need to be successful, they have the ability to engage and do their best work. And the company is getting what they need from the employee, and neither one is burning the other out. And so they have this quadrant where they're like, yeah, people can be happy, but that doesn't make them productive. They could be productive, but they may not be happy. And we're trying to create the balance of both of those things. And that's where you get the engagement suite.
I wrote the book Uncopyable Sales Secrets, co-wrote the book Uncopyable You, which is branding. But so much of what you're saying also applies to sales, that you want them to win. You don't just want people to be happy. You want them to be buying from you. And so it's not just a woo, oh, this is nice to have. There are definitely goals and benchmarks that you provide for companies, I'm sure.
Oh, absolutely. You do want people to buy from you. You do want there to be measurable goals and success. And I think especially as someone that provides more soft skill solutions, you still want to be able to quantify what does that look like successfully in an organization so they know you made a difference. And so a lot of times when I am creating solution, I'm also creating what does success look like if we get this right. It might be an increase in conversations, which leads to a decrease in regrettable attrition. It might look like a speed to market being increased. It might look like consistency in your business operations. So there's always a measurable milestone and a tangible thing that you want to get out of the relationship. It's not just, we want to have fun, and we want to show up and have a great training session. It's, we want to do this in the name of an outcome that we're trying to achieve together.
And I'm sure that speaks very loudly to management, to people leaders, because to have something tangible that they're working toward is going to be more meaningful. So we don't have a whole lot of time left, but you started this company, Enetic, and that you're an entrepreneur. And so many people say, I wish I could have my own business. You can take it on whenever you want. And we used to have a joke in our business. We've been entrepreneurs for 30 years plus. And I used to say, yeah, if you call and you want sales, press 1. If you want marketing, press 1. If you want tutorial, press 1.
Press 1. You hear all that. You do wear all the hat.
You do. So I want you just to address quickly, how did you start your business? What were the challenges? How did you overcome those and become successful? So that our listeners can have that.
Honest with you, I started my business. So on paper, my business probably started 15 years ago. And here's how it started. I used to work for an urgent care startup, and my role there was to lead engagement and learning development for all of our centers. And so when we opened a new center, I would do customer service training. I do all our service standards, all the things. And so one day, someone from a nonprofit community health center came into one of our clinics and was so impressed by her level of service that she called our office and said, did this. And my manager, the head of HR, was like, hey, she'd like to talk to you. She wants if you could help her. And I said, sure, but free. But just so we're clear.
Listen to this, not free. Don't give things away.
Yeah, not for free. Like, I'm totally happy to lend my expertise to improving the service in their clinics, but not for free. And she gave me her blessing to work with this other organization. And that was really the start of my consulting business. And so I did that for many years alongside my full-time job. And many of your listeners may understand this transition. And then I've been laid off 3 different times. I was telling people 2 more, I should get a fruit basket. But every time I would get laid off, I'd be like, this is the time I'm going to restart my business. And the first 2, I think I call them like false starts. Because what you really learn is that you have an expertise and you know how to do your expertise, but you may not know the business around your expertise. And so I think after the second layoff, I just started getting a better understanding of not what I do, because I can do what I do in my sleep. Most of us who have been in corporate America for 30 years, if that's the truth. But what you may not know is, what is your sales cycle? Because that's why so many of us end up going back to work, because we don't understand that like your sales cycle may actually be 3 or 6 months. And so I started really learning more of the marketing, the branding, what is the customer journey, those types of things, so that not so much I focused on my craft, but the business of my craft. And so that has been what has helped me become successful, is learning how to market, how to talk through what the pain points are, how to use a customer empathy map to build my branding. And what I would say to most people that are starting in their solopreneur journeys is that while you may feel like you're at a disadvantage, you are at an advantage, because you are both products and sales. You're all the thing. And so you intimately know the products. You don't have to go learn what's probably coming from you. You do know the pain points because you probably experienced them, which is why you built the thing. Just learn how to articulate it a little bit better so you can do the things. And so what I would say is figure out the business of your business, not just the craft of your business.
Great advice, because I know, especially women, we were talking about how many women are starting businesses, and they might be a side gig. And like you said, it's scary. So they might be transitioning, and they might have the passion of candle making or whatever, but there's a lot more to it. So those are great points. Kamaria, I want to let listeners know where to find you. I assume LinkedIn, Enetic, and where else? What would you like to supply listeners with to find you and engage with you?
Please find me in my favorite places. So yes, first is LinkedIn. I absolutely love when people say hello to me. So feel free to connect and say hello. The second is eneticlps.com. So you can send me an email. You can go to the website. And third, feel free to, if you are a people leader, engage with the Manager to Manager podcast. It is where we do talk to others who are or have been real people leaders, sharing their experiences and what it's like to be a people leader. So those are the 3 ways that you can engage with me, and I look forward to hearing from people.
I found this conversation fascinating. And as I said, it's different than other conversations I've had. So I think the listeners will be very interested. And Kamaria, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Uncopyable Women in Business. See you next time, and always remember to be uncopyable.